Hello and welcome to Souk News Television. This is the World News live from our studios in Lagos. Here are the headlines. Nigeria turns to solar-powered farming to boost rural development. Nigeria implements new cash disclosure rules for airlines. Senate approves TINUBU'S multi-billion-dollar borrowing plan. Trump tax law strains Treasury and Internal Revenue Service capacity. U.S. and Japan strike trade deal easing global economic concerns. Now, the news in details. The Nigerian government is working to implement the Supreme Court's directive mandating direct allocations to democratically elected local governments, but faces structural and logistical challenges. Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edu, disclosed this during a policy dialogue in Abuja, highlighting the need for system upgrades to enable smooth execution. While the government has already stopped disbursing funds to non-elected councils, the technical groundwork for direct transfers to legitimate local governments is ongoing. Edo emphasized the administration's commitment to institutional reforms required for full compliance with the constitutional ruling. The Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority, NCAA, has mandated all international airlines operating in Nigeria to enforce the $10,000 currency declaration rule for arriving passengers. This directive, issued April 24, 2025, requires airlines to announce during flights or before landing that travelers must declare any cash or negotiable instruments exceeding $10,000 or its foreign equivalent. The regulation aims to tighten Nigeria's anti-money laundering protocols and ensure alignment with global financial standards. NCAA spokesperson Michael Achimogu confirmed that the measure targets improved transparency and stronger control over cross-border cash movements, reinforcing the nation's efforts to curb illicit financial flows. The federal government has announced its strategic focus on agrivoltaics to drive rural energy access and agricultural productivity. At an international workshop in Abuja, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Technology, Uche Naji, highlighted that combining solar panels with farming can maximize land use, improve crop performance, and reduce water loss while expanding off-grid energy infrastructure. The initiative aligns with national plans to promote green industrialization and rural transformation through science-led innovation. Supported by Oregon State University and the University of Abuja, the launch of the book, Democratizing the Sun, marks a push towards building policies that support climate-resilient agri-solar enterprises and community-based renewable energy development. The Nigerian Senate has approved President Bola Tinubu's request to secure $21.5 billion, 2.2 billion euros, and 15 billion Japanese yen in external loans, alongside a 65 million euros grant. The loans, part of the 2025-2026 fiscal framework, are targeted at funding key infrastructure projects and addressing unpaid pension liabilities, some dating back to December 2023. Additionally, lawmakers authorized the issuance of 757.98 billion naira in domestic bonds to settle outstanding commitments under the contributory pension scheme. The Senate stressed the urgency of boosting capital investment and easing retiree hardships, while urging strict transparency and productivity in loan deployment. Moody's Investor Service has cautioned that Kenya's heavy reliance on local borrowing will keep its debt services cost elevated in the near term. Domestic debt, typically more expensive than external funding, is driving up interest obligations as the government struggles to close persistent budget deficits. Finance Minister John Mbadi's recent plan to cut the fiscal deficit to 4.8% of gross domestic product in the new financial year faces significant challenges, according to Moody's. The agency highlighted that 1/3 of government revenue is now spent on interest payments, a ratio among the highest globally. This growing debt burden severely restricts fiscal space, limiting Kenya's ability to invest in key sectors such as infrastructure, health, and education. Moody's emphasized the urgency of stronger fiscal controls and debt sustainability measures to prevent a deeper financial strain on public resources. And now, Zimbabwe's economy is dominated by informal activities, which account for 76% of total output, according to new data from the country's first economic census. Released in Harare on Wednesday, the report by the Zimbabwe National Statistics Agency highlights a growing reliance on untaxed informal trade, despite its critical role in daily livelihoods. The government is concerned about the minimal contribution of this sector to tax revenues. Policymakers are expected to use the data to design strategies that encourage formalization, improve tax compliance, and strengthen public finances without disrupting informal economic resilience. We'll take a short break. More global business and policy updates after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. Still on the world news here at Souk News Television, India's economy showed strong resilience in the face of global uncertainties, driven by a productive agricultural season, solid services sector performance, and steady industrial expansion. The Reserve Bank of India highlighted this in its July economic bulletin, crediting the sustained momentum in rural output and consumer demand for supporting economic stability. The central bank noted that increasing global trade tensions present both risks and opportunities. It urged India to deepen its integration into global value chains through resilient trade partnerships, positioning the country to benefit from shifting global economic alignments. The European Commission has ruled out introducing supervisory fees on major technology firms like Alphabet, Apple, Amazon, Meta, ByteDance, and Microsoft to fund the enforcement of the Digital Markets Act. Despite growing pressures from German officials and European Parliament lawmakers, the Commission's Executive Vice President, Henna Virkkunen, confirmed that there are no new proposals to impose such levies, though she acknowledged the option remains open for future review. The Digital Market Act, active since 2023, imposes strict operational rules on dominant platforms to curb their market power. Supporters of a supervisory fee argue it should mirror the 0.05% levy under the Digital Services Act. But for now, big tech will not bear the financial burden of compliance oversight, even as regulatory demands increase across Europe. The Treasury Department and Internal Revenue Service are struggling to meet strict implementation deadlines for President Donald Trump's sweeping new tax breaks as staffing shortages and policy complexity mount. The Internal Revenue Service has lost 25% of its workforce since January due to cuts led by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. With demand rising for tax guidance, the reduced agency is under pressure to release detailed rules quickly. Officials are working against time to clarify the multi-trillion-dollar law while grappling with limited resources and mounting confusion among taxpayers and businesses. Massive investment in artificial intelligence infrastructure is fueling a significant portion of United States GDP growth, with AI-related capital expenditure now accounting for over 1/3 of second quarter expansion. According to Carlyle strategist Jason Thomas, spending on data centers, chips, servers, and energy has triggered a reindustrialization of corporate America, reversing decades of focus on intangible assets. Morgan Stanley projects global AI infrastructure spending to reach $2.9 trillion by 2028, with a $1.5 trillion funding gap expected to be filled through debt markets. Analysts say this ongoing build-out may add up to 0.4 percentage points to U.S. GDP through 2026, reinforcing AI's powerful economic influence despite growing questions over sustainability and peak impact. And now a new trade agreement between the United States and Japan has calmed global markets and may set a model for other deals under negotiation. The pact lowers U.S. tariffs on Japanese autos and other goods to 15%, down from up to 27.5%, averting steeper hikes and giving businesses clearer ground for investment planning. Analysts say the 15% rate, though elevated, is sustainable for global trade. Following the announcement, Japan's Nikkei index surged 3.5%, with European automaker shares rising 4 to 10%. Economists say the agreement has reduced inflation pressure, creating room for the U.S. Federal Reserve to consider rate cuts later this year. However, uncertainty remains ahead of looming August deadlines for trade decisions involving the European Union, Canada, and Brazil. Following a White House meeting between President Donald Trump and Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the United States has announced a new 19% tariff on goods from the Philippines. This revised rate, slightly lower than the previously threatened 20%, comes as part of a broader trade agreement that eliminates U.S. tariffs on Philippine imports, with both leaders hailing the deal as a strategic milestone. While the Philippines had lobbied for a lower rate, the 1% reduction was framed by Marcos as a symbolic and practical win, emphasizing deepening ties with the United States and a pivot from Chinese influence. U.S.-Philippine trade reached $23.5 billion in 2024, with the United States remaining a critical export market for Philippine electronics and semiconductors. The new agreement is expected to evolve and expand over time, with further military cooperation hinted at by both leaders. And that's a wrap on World News for today. For more updates, do well to follow us on our social platforms. My name is Omobola Sandra for Souk News Television.